It's a brilliant Tuesday here on the 17th of October 2017, Jumbo Africa. And a very warm welcome to the first hour. Elvis Preslin.
Good morning to you.
Now, we will be with you until 12 o'clock today. Today, the focus falls on Parliament's inquiry into allegations of state capture at Eskom. And they will look into the awarding of tenders, Kendall.
Wow.
Huge, massive billion-rand tenders. The coal supply contracts to the Gupta-owned Tegeta Media, the media company rather, TNA, as well as the 400 million rand to Trillion.
Absolutely, and that's why we're asking you today, what are your expectations from this inquiry into state capture?
That's the question we pose to you. We'd like to find out from you on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom as well as on the Facebook page. Let's take a look at what you're telling us.
Dakriha says, the usual, running around in circles with no consequences. South Africa is a mess.
This one from the bike, Michael the Big M says, nothing as always. Waste of money, time and expenditure. When are we having the white monopoly capital inquiry? Of course, it's like we're diverting the attention from that. Well, these are some of your comments. Please keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue. But we'll also focus here on Gauteng. The MEC, Panyasa Lesuvi, the Education MEC, says that he's reviewing scholar patrollers in school as well as matric balls.
Very
in the interest of safety.
Very interesting. This obviously follows the reports that emerged that a 17-year-old matric learner was raped by the school patroller in September during a matric dance event. So we want to find out from you, do you support this suggestion that the MEC made that maybe matric balls should be banned?
Well, it's a very sensitive topic and people are crazy about these things. So we want to find out from you. What do you make of this suggestion by the MEC? Let's take a look at what you are telling us. On the poll, so far, 175 votes in, Kendall.
And fairly close. 47% say yes, they definitely support the suggestion, and 53% say no.
Tabang says, what is the reason behind this banning of the matric dance? Let's be realistic. It's not about expenses.
Doug Kliha comes in again and says, yes, this creates unnecessary spending for parents, expensive shoes, designer clothes, makeup, etc. Ban it. Once again, matric balls comes up and people talk about the expenses and so on, not about the safety issues around these kind of events at night in schools.
You got to think about your safety of your children rather first before you think about the expenses, because that's what we're talking about today. But let us know what's on your mind. We're going to read those comments. But the PSL resumes after a 2-week break, Kendall.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been looking forward to seeing what's going to happen with the PSL. And want to find out, we've got some key matches up happening tonight and tomorrow. What are your predictions for this week's matches in the Absolute Premiership?
This one from Sikamo says, a big game between Kaizer Chiefs and Masandawa. I predict a lovely draw.
Mr. Ndiko being euphemistic there. Doug Kliha is quite busy with us this morning. Thank you very much for keeping these coming in. Expecting Sundowns to beat Chiefs. Chiefs have got more players on the treatment table than those who are fit. What do you have to say about that, Elvis?
I can't disagree with you. But there you have it. Those are some of your comments. Keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue. But right now, let's get down to business and take a look at your news headlines. President Jacob Zuma has appointed the new SABC board. We'll bring you more on that story as it unfolds. Parliament's Public Enterprises Committee kicks off its long-awaited inquiry into state capture. And Life Esidimeni's arbitration continues this morning. More details are expected to emerge on how the mentally ill patients were treated at the various NGOs. And we'll probably go there live a little bit later, but right now, before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front.
Well, there's quite a lot happening. It's mostly football, in fact, both in the under-17s as well as right here at home. There's quite a lot to talk about in terms of football. So that is what we've got for you today. Good morning to you. This is what's happening in the sports today.
You're talking about the feeling of winning. I think that feeling is priceless for us.
Recently crowned MTNA champions, SuperSport United want to keep that winning feeling going as they prepare for the Telkom Cup. And Mamelodi Sundowns, shorn of their continental duties, resumed their domestic league campaign with a massive challenge against Kaizer Chiefs in Pretoria.
To clip it in towards the likes of Slimani. And Mahrez! He's done it this time!
Algerian forward Riyad Mahrez's first Premier League goal of the season secures Leicester a 1-1 draw with West Bromwich Albion. Yeah, there you go. It doesn't take them from the bottom of the log, though. But all this and more later on the sports. For now, stick with Elvis as he's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this hour. We start off with breaking news here in our bulletin. President Jacob Zuma has appointed the new SABC board. The new board has been appointed for a period of 5 years with immediate effect. Bongomuso Mokatini has been elected as the chairperson of the board, with Phoebe Potgieter-Qubule as the deputy. The other board members are Krish Naidu, Kanyesile Kwenyama, John Mattison, Matata Tsedu, Rachel Kaladas, Michael Mokovich, Victor Rambao, Dekwanyane Mohube, and Jack Palani. Now, the appointment of the new board comes as the media monitoring Africa was expected to file an urgent court interdict this morning to force President Jacob Zuma to appoint the new SABC board. Yesterday, President Zuma missed the deadline to oppose the advocacy group's application in the High Court in Johannesburg. Now, Parliament's inquiry into allegations of state capture at Eskom starts today. Up to 40 witnesses are expected to testify before the Public Enterprises Committee. Their names have not been made public, but the committee chairperson, Sukizwa Rato, said last week that businessman Atul Gupta as well as Duduzane Zuma are not on the list at the stage. The inquiry will look into the awarding of more than 11 billion rand of coal supply contracts at inflated prices at Gupta-owned Tegeta Exploration, the 43 million rand contract with the Gupta's media company, TNA, payments of more than 400 million rand to Trillion Capital Partners for management consulting and advisory service, and allegations of impropriety against the former acting CEO, Machela Koko. The inquiry's terms of reference also include the reappointment of Brian Molefe as the group CEO of Eskom. Meanwhile, the organization Undoing Tax Abuse Outer has asked energy regulator NERSA not to grant Eskom any tariff hikes next year, citing fraudulent forecast. The power utility has asked NERSA for a 19.9% increase. Outer says the economy can no longer be captured by deliberate over-forecast which guarantee Eskom massive price increases. Now, we'll probably go to Parliament in a short while to capture that for you as well, so you have to stay tuned. Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa says a commission of inquiry into state capture must be established as soon as possible so that South Africa can regain its credibility in the eyes of the world and its own citizens. Now, he was speaking at the South African Forum of Civil Engineering Contractors annual gala dinner last night.
We still call on the Commission of Inquiry to be established, because it is only through this Commission of Inquiry that we will get to the bottom of precisely what has happened in this very sad, dark era of our democracy, where institutions of our state have been captured and utilized for the benefit of just a few or some families. Now, as South Africans, many of you have collectively stood up and said, this is not acceptable. And it is true, it cannot and should not be acceptable that our resources, the resources that are owned by all our people, should be abused and wasted in this way. So we live in hope that this Commission of Inquiry will be appointed and that it will be appointed soon.
Meanwhile, the Finance Minister, Malusi Gigaba, has also come out in support of a judicial commission of inquiry into corruption across South Africa. Now, he was speaking in an interview with the U.S. news channel CNN. Gigaba said it was concerning for the South African economy that corruption charges against the President, Jacob Zuma, have been reinstated, saying it raises political risk. The minister was in Washington as part of a delegation representing South Africa at the annual meetings of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, and the World Bank. And that is why we're asking you this question on your screen right now. The inquiry will start today. What are your expectations from the inquiry into state capture? This one coming from Jennifer Rundle says, Dololo, nada, zilch, nothing, nix. Katlejo says, I'm expecting nothing but lies in favor of President Zuma and his cabinet ministers. Well, those are your comments. Keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue. But more shocking revelations have emerged at the Esidimeni arbitration hearings here in Johannesburg. A social worker from the Cullinan Care and Rehabilitation Center in Gauteng, which housed 2 of the unlicensed non-governmental organizations, testified how they were forced to take in a large number of patients whom they were unqualified to take care of. Now, this emerged during the start of the second week of the Alternative Dispute Resolution sitting headed by retired Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Mosoneke. The hearings are seeking answers as to how more than 100 mentally ill patients died.
The Cullinan Rehabilitation Center NGOs Siyabadinga and Anchor under its roof. 25 mentally ill patients died here. Among them, Joseph Gumede. He died in July last year, a month after being moved from Life Esidimeni, and his family only informed 8 months later.
That you visited the family in February 2017, and he died 24th July 2016.
With this case, it is correct.
It is correct.
The Cullinan social worker Daphne Ndlovu also testified that 60% of patients did not have medical records. She said the facility was equipped to care for 150 patients, but ended up with 267.
Mrs. Ndlovu, was it not then unreasonable to take those patients into your care when you didn't have that information and you knew you couldn't properly care for them?
She admitted the facility had been forced to discharge some of its patients to accommodate those from Esidimeni. Among them, Yaku Stolz and Thabo Munyane, who later died at the unlicensed NGOs.
You discharged them against your will, and after they die. Can you describe your response to this?
Judge, it was indeed very painful to hear, like each and every after 2 days, that one patient has passed on.
Ndlovu was at pains to explain why some of the patients died of dehydration and hypothermia.
What do you say caused all that in your, let's even say, layman observation? In your layperson observation, what is it? What was it?
That one, Judge, I won't be able to tell. That is why I'm saying, according to my perception, I think that maybe it was because of the moving of many patients at the same time.
While to loud murmurs from family members, Ndlovu also told the hearing that most did not visit their loved ones and simply dumped them at the facilities. But these family members will have a chance to tell their side of the story as the hearing continues. Criselda Lewis, SABC News, in Parktown, Johannesburg.
To the courts now. Sentencing proceedings in the case of the convicted rapist and Kwaito star Sipho Ndlovu, known as Bricks, is expected to commence at the Roodepoort Magistrates Court this morning. In July, the 36-year-old Ndlovu was found guilty of raping his then 16-year-old niece in his Reimse home on the West Rand. The crime was committed in 2013. Late last month, the Roodepoort Magistrates Court heard arguments from the State and Defence Counsel for the appropriate sentence for the crime. Bricks' lawyers asked the court to show leniency as it was his first offence. They also submitted that the prescribed minimum sentence of 10 years should be ignored. The rape victim told the court that she regarded Briggs as a parent. She stated in an affidavit that her wounds are yet to heal as she continues to experience the trauma of the rape. Well, let's now go to our picture of the day. And that one comes from @TheBlackSpice that says, Jacob Zuma road and a giant statue in Nigeria. That's the statue of the president, of course, in Nigeria there. That's the picture of the day. Our comment of the day comes from Ibrahim Sincere, and he says, our blood is not cheaper, our lives are not worthless. We are not used to this. Mogadishu, truck bomb. You remember the bomb blast in Mogadishu, killing more than 270 people. Death toll still climbing there, number of people injured as well. Let's now take a look at what's happening in our courts. Suspended Home Affairs Director John Mkuseli Ampleni will challenge his suspension in the North Gauteng High Court. Now he wants the court to reinstate him. Home Affairs Minister Shlengiwe Mkhize placed him on precautionary suspension in September. And then we turn to Kwaito Star Sipho Ndovo, commonly known as Briggs, that are appearing in the Rhodepoort Magistrates Court for sentencing this morning. He was convicted in July for raping his niece 4 years ago. She was 16 at the time. Let's now throw forward, and tomorrow on the show we will be focusing on child murders. Last week, the Police Minister Fikile Mbalula revealed that more than 1,000 children or child murders were reported during the 2014 and 2015 financial year. It's a shocking story. We're going to break it down for you tomorrow morning right here on the Newsroom. But right now, let's take a break, and when we return, we focus on the issues at hand and the theme for today, looking at safety of children in schools.
Why is there a dispute over who is the rightful heir to the throne?
What I can say is that Masindi is a woman. She's a girl. She's a girl child. Because I think that if she was a male, there's no way that anybody was going to dispute the fact that she is the rightful heir.
Do you recognize her as your rightful heir?
Yeah, no, I would definitely say that she is my daughter. She grew up there.
What is the intention?
I want my throne.
Join me in Port Sedu live every Monday to Thursday at 17:30.
It is 6 p.m. Central African Time, broadcasting live from Johannesburg. This is Primetime News.
South Africa said farewell to one of the Rivonia trialists, Uncle Kathy, a fearless stalwart.
With this man, who was so engaged, so busy, so witty, so funny, so wise, and so incredibly principled.
Joseph Shabalala has been honored for his contribution to the South African music industry. A statue in his honor was unveiled during an annual gala dinner in Ladysmith.
The shot of the day, however, belonged to American Daniel Berger, who chipped in for an eagle on the par 4 fifth hole.
For all your news updates, stay on Primetime News every Saturday and Sunday from 6 p.m.
Now, the Gauteng Education MEC, Panyasa Lesuvi, visited Mashuba Valley Secondary School yesterday following a report that a 17-year-old matric learner was allegedly raped by the school patroller in September at a matric dance event. Mashuba Valley Secondary School teachers reportedly walked in on the man in the act. MEC Lesufi also visit also a school in Benoni where another girl was allegedly raped by a grade 10 learner at a farewell party. 87 Soweto learners at the AB Kuma Primary School were also sexually assaulted by a school patroller. Now, on Sunday, Gauteng education officials met with the parents and the AB Kuma School, the governing body, now to talk to us and give us more updates on these stories and what the department is doing about them. We are joined by the Gauteng Education Department spokesperson, Mr. Steve Mabona. A very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Good morning.
You've had a very busy couple of weeks and months with schools and, of course, running up to the exams. But if we look at the situations and the events that are unfolding right now with school patrollers abusing children in schools, do we have a crisis?
Look, we have a challenge that we are facing. Hence, we have said probably if it comes to a push, we must be very close to the process of appointing the patrollers, because you have the Department of Community Safety and the CPF, taking responsibility on that score. But we feel that probably we need to be very close to the process. Hence, we have actually requested that we need to rescreen all of them. And well, at some point, the MEC said, but then if we're not succeeding, probably we might have to look at not having, them in our environment, to probably find a new mechanism on how we're going to safeguard our environment, because we'll understand that we can't not have security in our environment. We have now smart boards, we have educators, we have learners in our environment, which must be, safe. So we cannot say we're not going to have some sense of security in our environment, because it will be dire to our detriment.
Now, what is the primary role of the patroller? Because when I hear patroller, I think of somebody maybe just marching the children out of school and take them across the road.
No, look, it's security. If you want me to put it in a very simple language, it's security at the school. But understandably,
which is critical.
Which is critical. But understandably so, we cannot afford to have security officials at all our schools. That will be cumbersome to our budget. So hence we're saying probably we need to have new mechanism on how we're going to manage the process and have security in our environment. But we are working on making sure that we improve and make sure that the safety measures that are in place are implemented, and all role players must have their responsibility, adhering to it.
I want you to give us an update. The MEC visited some schools yesterday. He was the grade 10 pupil that was raped in Benoni. Tell us about the latest about that story. What's going on there?
Look, that one, it was a farewell function which was organized outside the schooling environment. It was a weekend on a Saturday in a park somewhere in Benoni. And, well, allegedly, learners were under the influence of alcohol, which is quite sad. I mean, at that age that you should be focusing on learning and thinking about your future. But our learners decide to indulge in alcohol, which is quite sad. Same with the Mahube issue. I mean, there was a lot of alcohol that was in the play. So we were then informed that the learner went for a bathroom and was then assisted by this boy who offered that, at his home, because he resides not far from the park. But then they know each other from school. They're in the same school. So went into the house, and allegedly that rape occurred in the house. So, and police were called. He was apprehended and released into parents' custody. As you know, he's a 16-year-old. And moving forward, we'll be monitoring it very closely with the police on how are they managing. But from the school environment, the boy must be suspended. And I mean, that's misconduct of the highest degree. And we need to support then the learner, the girl learner, with the study material. But if the parents feel that they don't need her in the school, we will then have to facilitate that process and take her to another school. But what is paramount is for us to support her with probably material that she might need, so that she is in a state where she will be ready to write your final examination. But on the other hand, the counseling process will then proceed, But then we felt that probably we need to counsel the boy as well, because there are allegations that he might have been involved in the other previous matters of rape, because there's 2 girl learners who came forward to say we were also raped by this boy. So we feel strongly that we also need to make sure that professionally he is assisted.
These are now 2 cases where matric dances and matric balls and farewells are involved. Now, we are conducting a poll today, and we want to find out from our viewers, what do they make of the MEC suggestion that matric balls should be banned? Let's take a look at the poll and just see what the numbers suggest for us today. Can we put up that poll there for us and see where we are? Let's take a look. If the poll is up, well, it seems like there's a short delay. But while we're waiting for it, oh, there it is. We're asking you, do you support the MEC suggestion to ban matric dances and farewells and so forth? Now, this poll, 220 votes in, 52% are saying no, we should not ban them, 48% are saying yes. So it's very close. But there's also some tweets that we're receiving on this. Andrew says, matric dance has lost its meaning. Nowadays, students go there to get drunk and end up doing nasty things. That's exactly what you were just telling us now. He continues, he says, the matric dance has lost its meaning. Nowadays, in fact, it's the same tweet that we have there. But these are the situations. So the MEC is suggesting that there should be no matric dance.
Look, we know that, we'll take umbrage from all corners. I mean, from learners, your RCL will come forward and say, no ways, that cannot happen. The poll, we can assume that the poll come from parents.
Yes.
I mean, kids are at school now, so you have an understanding that these are parents that are saying, no, must continue. I mean, parents invest a lot of money in matric dance. They buy dresses, they make sure that learner come in style and all those things. So, but then we need to look at the bigger picture. Hence, you are saying probably let's put it there, let's debate. Do we really need this kind of events where we're going to be derailed while we are actually preparing for the final examination? We need to focus and make sure that our learners are ready. Now, learners are destabilized because of alcohol, then you will have these incidences that will derail them not to be ready. Because that learner might not pass.
Exactly.
Because mentally you need to be fit when you go for final examination. We will be supporting the process of counseling has begun. We will make sure that we support her. But there was a feeling that she need to be home. Because with the media frenzy at that school yesterday, everyone now knows about it. And probably they will know who are we talking about.
Yes.
And probably she might just feel, chastised at the school. I mean, how learners will behave. So we're going to give her an opportunity to go home, be relaxed there. But then we must then make sure that we support her because she must then, write the final examination.
So the idea really is about safeguarding the children and preparing them for the exam, which is much more important than entertainment.
Definitely, that's what we are for. I mean, anything that we are talking about as Department of Education, our learner is a priority. Anything else then will follow. Hence, we will know that anything which has to do with not education related, we will not prioritize it. But then, if you harm our learners, we move with speed that it's actually necessary.
I would even suggest that I would go so far as to suggest that the matric party should be moved to the end of the year after the matric exams. And that's probably an idea to think about. But let's move on to a very important story, the AB Kluma Primary School incident where the teacher, were the teachers aware of the incidents or the sexual abuse that was happening in the school or not? Because we believe that there were students or learners or pupils that went to the principal and reported these issues.
Look, we have decided to launch an investigation which necessitated the removal of the principal and the management because of the same allegations that probably this matter was reported and nothing has happened, nothing was done. And so we felt that let's remove them from the school. The investigative body continue to do their work, assist us to understand what transpired, also giving an opportunity the police investigation, to go parallel and continue. So on Sunday, what we did there was to encourage parents to say, at some point, learners must go to court, unfortunately. So the psychologists that are there, they are actually training them not to lie, training them how to preserve evidence, how to present your case and what to say, what not to say, probably. So that process, it's moving ahead. I mean, our psychologists have been there since Tuesday last week. So it's a continuous process, that of healing and making sure that there's a process of reintegration into the school, because there are those that feel that they don't want to come back, and there's parents who have raised issues that they don't think that their children will be safe. And we said we will give them an opportunity if they want to move to other schools, give them an opportunity to do that, assist them with that process so that they can then move the learners to a space where they will be comfortable, that they will be safe.
What action will the school take, and what would be the sanctions imposed on those found guilty, these patrollers, scholar patrollers that was now found abusing or allegedly abusing these children?
No, the scholar patroller, you terminate the service immediately because they're on a one-year contract. So that we have not even wasted time. The Mahube one, we have terminated the service, though he's in custody now, but it's immaterial. We have said the process of paperwork must then continue, and actually, to go back to that one, suspend the learners who brought alcohol in the schooling environment. We said probably they don't know what they are doing. They are promoting things that we don't want. Though the function was not at the school, but it was a school function, so you can't bring alcohol in that environment.
Going back to AB Kuma, the MEC also suspended the management there. Is it the entire management, or who was suspended?
It's the principal and the two officials, that is your head of departments, because that they form part of the senior management. There's no deputy principal at the school. If there was going to be part of that. But it's not a suspension. You need to be very cautious, because they might say the department suspended us on air or in the media. It's a removal, precautionary removal from their posts to the district. They will be operating from there, because we have learned the issue of suspending educators. One will be at home doing nothing, but will continue to pay. So we felt, and probably maybe lose a case and one come back into the system. So we felt that if we remove, let them go to the district, find a way of making sure that they do some work using their experience as educators, assist the department, unlike we pay and you are sitting at home. So that's what we are doing now in all the cases that we have to suspend or remove from the post.
Let's take a look again at our poll, and it has been updated to give us a look at the numbers and what people are suggesting right now. We're asking you, do you support the MEC suggestion to ban matric dances? Well, so far, 52% of you are saying no, 244 votes in. 48% are saying yes, it should be. So it's very close. It's about 4% difference of people that feeling that matric dances should be banned, because number one, it is a safety concern for the MEC, and number two, of course, you spend money as a parent. GM Shinner says he must just put systems in place to prevent the reoccurrence of this. But how do you prevent it if you have an outside function where you don't have any control? Atini says, opinion, yes, I fully support the MEC suggestion to ban such useless things. Atini, you are my hero. I think there's a lot of things going on. Katlejo says, what are they celebrating? They haven't written the final exams yet, let alone passing grade 12. There's booze in matric dances, and that makes it unsafe for our kids. Well, there you have it. These are the thoughts that you are presenting to us. Let us know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on the Facebook page. And this is exactly what we're talking about. It's about keeping the children safe, number one concern, and number two, educating our children.
Definitely. I mean, the safety of our learner is a priority. Hence, we have your security management teams at the schooling environment. That is led by the principal. You have the RCL, you have the educator, you have SGB that is represented in that committee to say if there's weapons in the school, they must do some work. If there's drugs in the school, if there's those cases of sexual harassment, they must move with speed, because policy is there to assist them on how to implement. And so we are saying the security or safety of our learner is a priority. Hence, when you have your taverns that are close to school, we recommend that those ones must be closed. So we don't need any activity that is going to derail the schooling environment.
Mr. Mabona, from your department's perspective, your message to teachers out there who suspect that there might be learners in schools that are being abused, what do they do?
Look, what we said, we have decided to utilize our life orientation educators to say we want to use them as the, an entry point, one might put it that way. A learner must know that when I go to life orientation educator, I will be assisted there. She or he will know what to do and channel my complaints. So that's one of the things that we are thinking we need to implement, with speed. To say, because we need an environment where learners are, it's very easy for them to confide. Because when you probe in a certain way, you should be in a position to get what is really happening. Because when you go into, for an example, just come into a class and want to shout while you are at the door and say, what happened to you and all those things. Those are the things that they would not assist us. So we feel that the life orientation educators, they will be critical. Hence, when we went to different schools promoting, the respect on the girl child, talking to both girl child and the boy child to say, you need to respect women, you need to make sure that you protect them, they are not abused. If there's anything happening to them, make sure that you stand up for them and just respect, make sure that they are safe. So that's the campaign that the Gauteng provincial government is on, making sure that we avail your needs, that they need, the girls, your sanitary towels, anything that they might need, so that they don't feel humiliated, don't feel neglected. They don't even probably think about going to, elderly men and interacting with them for a purpose of them wanting to utilize money to buy necessary things that they can really afford at school. So that's what we are doing as a department, and we are encouraging everyone in the schooling environment. Let's make sure that we are vigilant. We encourage learners to be in a space where they can report. When the principal receive any allegation, they need to do their work. Policy is there. They must just implement the policy and make sure that the environment is conducive.
What if the pupil cannot, or the learner cannot get any joy from the teacher at school? How do they proceed with the matter with their parents?
Look, the schools are attached to a district. They will know their district. Each and every school is attached to a district. And at the district, there's a senior person there who is a director in our environment. The director is quite a senior person. So we'll make sure that their complaints are attended to. But if there's a failure thereof, then there's a toll-free that we can utilize to call and sensitize, But the MEC is always willing to intervene on all these matters, and he's normally accessible. You will say in a public space to say, you can email me, your issues are going to be attended to. So MEC's email is panyaza.lisufi@gauteng.gov.za. The toll-free number is 0800 000 789. 0800 000 789. That's our toll-free number. You can call there and seek assistance, and surely you should be attended to.
Mr. Mabona, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for coming in. That was Steve Mabona. He is, of course, the spokesperson for the Gauteng Education Department here in studio for us, talking to us about the recent incidents of sexual violence in Gauteng schools. And of course, you've seen the poll. I want you to participate in that poll and let us know what's on your mind. Do you think that the matric balls is perhaps a problem faced by our children? And of course, the issues that they're confronted with. 244 votes in, 52% in says no, 48% are saying yes. But we'll take a look at some of your comments a little bit later. Let's now go to social media and take a look at Facebook and what is happening there today. Kenya says that the latest attacks in the Somali capital Mogadishu will not deter it from its fight against terrorism. Now this, as you can recall, follows the killing of more than 300 people. That's the figure now, and that has risen after twin bombs exploded in Mogadishu on Saturday. Then moving on, the African National Congress in the Western Cape is calling on the provincial government to urgently resolve the problems at the state mortuaries at Tygerberg and Salt River, where delays in autopsies are being experienced. Of course, the delays especially concerning the Muslim community who need to bury their loved ones in 24 hours, and it seems there is a problem there. We'll bring you some more on that story as we continue. And finally, a risk premium has returned to oil markets with a vengeance, boosting global price benchmarks as escalating fighting in Iraq threatens supplies, while political tensions loom between the United States and Iran. Now, if you want to see more of this, simply search for SABC Newsroom on Facebook, and you can follow us and interact with us, and you become part and parcel of the greater family here on SABC. Let's now go international and take a look at the front pages of the newspapers from around the globe, and we're starting off in Europe. 15-year limit on peerage. Now, starting there, the Times report that newspaperage have a 15-year time limit under a plan to shrink the House of Lords. Well, there you have it. Moving to New York, the Financial Times reports that astronomers have entered a new era, combining observations of gravitational waves and light for the first time. They've recorded a cataclysmic collision between two neutrons, the stars that's in a distant galaxy, which not only set the universe aquiver but also propelled newly created atoms of gold, uranium and other heavy metals into space. Look at that picture there. And finally, in Israel, the Jerusalem Post reports that a rare 200-seat theater from the Roman period and 8 large ancient stone courses have been unearthed under the Western Wall's Wilson Arch by the Israel Antiquities Authority. Well, those are your newspapers from around the globe. We'll take a short break, and when we return, we speak to William Bird of Media Monitoring around the issue of the South African Broadcasting Corporation on new board. Now, we had the breaking news a little bit earlier for you. President Jacob Zuma has appointed the new SABC board. Now, the new board has been appointed for a period of 5 years with immediate effect. Bongomusa Makatini has been elected as the chairperson of the board, with Phoebe Potgieter-Kabule as the deputy. Of course, there's a number of other board members, but joining us now on the line is William Bird from Media Monitoring to give us his take on the story. A very good morning to you, William, and welcome.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me on the program.
Now, you were supposed to interdict the president this morning on the urgent interdict to force the president to sign off the new board. What happened?
Well, we gave the president until yesterday, 5 o'clock, to respond to our request, and he opted not to. And we were preparing, in fact, our papers, and we were going to lodge them, and we were scheduled to then appear on Tuesday next week. Unfortunately, now we don't have to do that. I think we really need to welcome this important decision, but we must also acknowledge that as delighted as we are, we can't let that delight be clouded over by the fact that it is 3 weeks too late that we've had a public broadcaster having to function without any board at all.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think the president left it until so very late?
Well, all of that stuff is speculation. The allegations about them trying to elect their own people into positions of senior management. But I think that the important thing is it would appear that it was only the threat of court action that forced the president to take this decision, which is a pity. It really was a last resort for us. But the fact that we've now got a board, I think we need to all get behind them, support them, and hope that they can start to undo a lot of the damage and restore credibility of the public broadcaster.
What do you make of the new chairperson, Bongamusa Makhathini, and the deputy?
Look, I think it's no surprise that the president has chosen those that are probably more closely aligned to him. I think the one concern about the board chair, Mr. Makhathini, is that he is apparently the chair of one of Mr. Zuma's family trusts. If that is in fact true, I think it's really important that he resigns from those family trusts immediately, because otherwise his own independence will be seen to be deeply compromised.
It seems that the interim board was retained, to a part of the interim board. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that the interim board demonstrated a clear willingness and desire to get stuff done. They made a lot of movements, a lot of positive changes from what we hear from within the SABC, and certainly on the publicly it looked as though they were doing the right kinds of things. So I think it's important that you've retained them, and that there's a little bit of continuity there. There really is a lot that they need to be getting on with. I think one of their key priorities must be, however, to remember that last year we saw very clear threats on the lives of our journalists and direct intimidation, ending tragically in the passing of Suna Fenta, obviously. And one of their priorities must then be to make sure that those responsible for those threats are identified and brought to book.
What are some of the biggest challenges that the new board have to deal with immediately?
Well, I think it's obviously around appointments of some of the senior executives. We know that the interim board has nominated, has gone through public processes to identify some of those people, so it'll be important that the board pursue those avenues and identify the best people to get into those places. I think the editorial policies, that review process that started, it will be a nice way for them to get stuck into those things and make sure that they commit to the independence and credibility of the public broadcaster.
William, I thank you so much for your time and joining us on the line.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to all.
Thank you. That was William Bird. He's the executive at Media Monitoring Africa, giving us his thoughts on the appointment of SABC boards. And as you heard, congratulations to all of us here at the SABC. And of course, congratulations to the new board. Well, as Parliament gets set to start an inquiry into alleged state capture, management consultancy McKinsey has described as embarrassing the errors it made while working on a 1.6 billion rand contract with Eskom. Parliament and police are investigating allegations of fraud in that contract. McKinsey says it has parted ways with some staff involved in its work with Eskom and a local Gupta-controlled consultancy firm Trillion in 2016. In McKinsey's first admission of wrongdoing since the scandal broke in July, it says an internal investigation has found violations of professional standards. Eskom is now demanding that the two firms pay back the 1.6 billion rand that they received from Eskom and what the power utility calls an unlawful consultancy contract. We'll bring you more as Parliament will be sitting shortly and we'll bring you that update on that story. But right now, seeing that it's getting hot in here, let's find out from Phil if it's still hot out there.
Waiting them to come in.
Thank you. A very good morning. Let's take a look at what's happening in the weather. Now, of course, we start off by taking a look at a little bit of rainfall forecast through South Africa's southern and southeastern coastlines as well. Now, what we're expecting for today are low pressure systems which are passing by, interacting with some higher pressure bands which have moved into the area there. This is going to cause some windy conditions, especially along South Africa's southern coastline, with gale force winds forecast for Port Elizabeth and surrounding areas for today. Clear conditions forecast for most of southern Africa there. The west coastline getting just a little bit of a low pressure system which is drawing in some cloud cover, and for tomorrow some rainfall as well. But the biggest changes in our weather come tomorrow in South Africa. We're seeing that we're left with just a little bit of cloud cover and rainfall towards the southwest, which is in fact caused by a secondary cold front which is moving in, and that primary cold front which is now moving away from the east coast leaves behind just a bit of cloud cover for parts of South Africa as well as Mozambique. Let's take a look at the temperatures in relation to that. 18 in Cape Town, so about a degree warmer than yesterday. Temperatures in the central interior around Bloemfontein substantially cooler than yesterday at 19 degrees Celsius. Pretoria, a hot day there again, a 30-degree maximum. Sunny skies forecast for the area, and we're going to see some gusting winds possible in the area. Gaborone, 31 degrees Celsius. Now temperatures in the capital city of Windhoek there, of Namibia of course, Windhoek 33 degrees Celsius. It's going to be a sunny day throughout most, if not all areas around Southern Africa. Victoria Falls at 40 degrees Celsius today. Now, today, what we're seeing is afternoon cloud cover forecast for the island regions here. It's going to be a fairly warm one at 27 to 31 degrees now, maximum temperatures as well. Continental Africa expecting a bit of cloud cover as well. As we said, the western coastline is getting some of that cloud cover, starting to get a bit more rainfall as well in Luanda at 29 degrees Celsius. The rainfall continuing around Kampala, Nairobi, Juba. These areas expecting more wet weather for today. Now, moving into North Africa, what we see is that just a little bit of rainfall forecast for Morocco. It's most likely just in the form of very, very light passing showers in the area there. Some showers and thunder showers forecast through the usual areas there around Ethiopia's highlands, moving through in towards areas such as the coastlines of West Africa. And taking a look at tomorrow's weather, we continue to see a lot of that happening, especially concentrated around Gabon, around parts of Cameroon and surrounding areas there. Isolated showers over West Africa's southern coastline again, as well as Ethiopia's interior. Temperature-wise, it's at about 30 degrees in Cairo. Sunny skies forecast for many of these areas. Khartoum's at 39 degrees, Agadez at 36, and temperatures remaining very warm as we move into West Africa. 30 degrees in Marrakesh, 31 in Dakar, and Bamako peaks at 38 degrees. Lagos is at 29 degrees for today's maximum temperature. This is where we're going to leave your weather for now. It's time to get you an update on your sports news. Kendall, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's actually been a very interesting morning today, how we try and manage and cover everything that's important to you in terms of news. Yes, it's time to talk a little bit about how SuperSport United defender Clayton Daniels says they want to make the culture of winning trophies a common thing at the Pretoria-based side. United, who've just been crowned MTN8 champions, have got an opportunity to win 2 more trophies before the end of this year. They'll be visiting Bloemfontein Celtic in the last 16 of the Telkom knockout next weekend. This weekend, United will be involved in the semi-final of the CAF Confederations Cup.
The dust has hardly settled on winning the MTN8 trophy, and SuperSport United have their sights set on the Telkom knockout. Last season, United reached the final of the Telkom knockout, but lost to new kids on the block, Cape Town City. But under new coach Eric Tinkler, the club is already eyeing a treble early in the season.
You're talking about the feeling of winning. I think that feeling is priceless for us as a group, as a club. You know, we love the feeling, but nothing more than lifting the cup is worth it. As a club, we want to be in these competitions. We want to do well. You know, we want to put our name on the big map in Africa, so that we are a recognized club. You know, and we're very grateful for the opportunity.
On the other hand, the 2017 MTN8 losing finalist Cape Town City want to make amends by defending the trophy they won last season.
Obviously, that's the nice thing about football. You always get another opportunity to rectify what we call as a loss. And I think for us it was a learning over the weekend, in the MTN final. But we get another opportunity now to try and go all the way to the final.
After failing to finish in the top 8 bracket for the very first time in the history of the PSL, Orlando Pirates want to make their supporters happy by at least winning some silverware this season.
The coach always tells us that this season we have to bring back the pride of the team, but you also need to do things correctly. You can't just go into the field of play and thinking about last season. We have to prepare for matches, we have to do things well. We have to know that every game that comes, we play like a cup final.
But for ABSA Premiership defending champions Bidvest Wits, improving their position on the ABSA Premiership log should be a priority at this stage. Wits are second from the bottom after 7 matches.
We have to focus on the opponents that are coming first, of which it's a league game before and then the cup after. So if we would switch off and say we're focusing on winning a Telkom Cup because we were taken out of the MTN 8, it would be wrong for me to say so.
The first round matches of the Telkom knockout will be played next weekend, with the final to be staged in the first week of December. Sfiso Ramara, SABC News, Johannesburg.
All right, and of course we've got the ABSA Premiership, which kicks off again. It resumes after a 2-week break after cup competitions as well as an international break. So now let's have a look and see what's happening tonight, 17th, as well as tomorrow on the 18th. As you can see, Cape Town City FC up against Bloem Celtic at Athlone Stadium, and the match at Bidvest Stadium has been postponed. That was going to be between SuperSport and Wits themselves. Mamelodi Sundowns against Kaizer Chiefs. For a lot of people, this is the match of the evening. And then tomorrow, Chippa United play Maritzburg United, and then Free State Stars host Ajax. Orlando Pirates against Platinum Stars. Should be an interesting match, that one. Baroka FC against Golden Arrows, and Amazulu FC, the host for Polokwane City. All right, now, final story for this hour, we'll talk about UEFA Champions League, where Real Madrid will keep a close eye on Tottenham Hotspur forward Harry Kane in their UEFA Champions League group match in Madrid later this evening. Kane leads their scoring in the prestigious European competition with 5 goals. That's one more than Cristiano Ronaldo. In Manchester, City are ready to host Napoli in their other big match of the night.
Kane has scored 43 goals in 38 games for club and country this year. No wonder then that the Spanish giants regard the England international as a serious threat. Coach Zinedine Zidane ducked questions about a possible Kane signing, but was eager to heap praise on the young player.
Lo que está haciendo es un jugador fundamental por el Tottenham.
He's an essential player for Tottenham. He's very good in every aspect. Whatever he does, it's with the objective to score a goal. He's not static. He always builds speed and looks for the space, and that is good. He's a complete player. He doesn't look like that, but he is.
Spurs are relishing the opportunity to play in the elite competition. It's a chance to show what they're capable of.
It's a big opportunity for us, for a young team, and we will try to play as we used to do. Try to be dominant, try to be aggressive from the start, and try to enjoy, because it's a fantastic place to play football.
City, meanwhile, top Group F with 6 points after winning their opening 2 games. Napoli are third, level on 3 points with Shakhtar Donetsk. City winger Raheem Sterling remains an integral part of the attack and credits coach Pep Guardiola for improving as a player.
He's been massive for me, especially with the basic and simple stuff. He always tries to get you to do the simple stuff at a really top level, and that's the really genius thing about him. He makes sure he does the simple things and it works.
Napoli have never won an away game against English opposition, but Guardiola is still hoping for an exciting match.
For me, it's fascinating to have the challenge, because that is a game, and I like to face the teams like a game. And hopefully we can especially see both teams a good game for the spectators in Etihad, or the guys who decide to watch us on TV can enjoy good football.
All matches get underway at 9:15 South African time tonight. Liesel Zankel, SABC News.
Right, now let's have a quick look-see to see what's happening in the world of sports. According to you on social media, I do know that you've been very busy with us the entire day. Matthew Sumpahlele says Sundowns will win today's game. Of course, we want to find out what your predictions are for this week's midweek matches in the PSL. McGraw reckons Chiefs will lose twice in a space of 4 days. Not very happy with how our Chiefs has been performing, are you? Michael Bigams Toller says, I foresee the struggle continuing for Kaizer Chiefs. A luta continua and no victoria in any sight. Orlando Pirates continuing their great from 10 points from every 5 games. Yeah, so Michael Bigams Toller got lots to say about that. Katleho KG says Kaizer Chiefs should do what they do best and give Mamelodi Sundowns the 3 points as always, please. Right, now we've been seeing a lot of shocking revelations coming out of the life Esidimeni arbitration hearing where Dikgamo Seneke has been presiding, Elvis.
It's now week 2, Kendall. It's going to proceed to week 3. So we continue with the witnesses there. More shocking revelations, of course, emerging at the Esidimeni arbitrations. Let's now go there live.
The drafting of this document?
Yes, Council.
So you acknowledge the contents of this document as correct?
Yes, Council.
It appears on page 1 of the document that it appears to be emanating from J.J. Ngobo.
Yes, Council.
And would that multidisciplinary team be mentioned in the document as the authors or co-authors of this report?
Okay, if you would like to, you would like us to mention our name, we will do so and give you a new printout, Council.
So like it doesn't appear in the report?
No, Council.
Thank you.
If you can check in front of this document, the document was going to Dr. Ramokgopa. It was a request by Dr. Ramokgopa.
To the extent that you accept or confirm its correctness, I'm going to refer you to page 6 of the document. Where at the second paragraph, it is recorded that the mental health care users came with their patient files, which contained some of the information, but lacked medical history. These files were prepared by Life Esidimeni staff and just handed over with the users. Some of the patients came with their identity documents too. They were admitted at Cullinan Care and Rehabilitation Center. Is this correct?
It is correct, Council.
So the patients were indeed transferred to Cullinan with their files?
Yes, Council.
If we go back to just the first sentence that, from the paragraph that I've just read, there is reference to information. What would this information entail?
Where, Council?
The first sentence says the mental health care users came with their patient files, which contained some of the information, but lacked medical history. Let's not deal with the medical history. I just want to get clarity. When reference is made to information, what would the information be?
Inside the files of the users, some of the file has the mental health care forms. For mental health care, Form 4, Form 5s, Form 7, Form 13A, and the form that they've used to transfer them, Form 7, sorry, Form 11.
Ms. Ndlovu, for purposes of simplifying the information sought to you, the question was, what type of information is sought? What is requested of you is to give the type of information. The people before you, they do not know what is contained in those forms.
Okay.
Can you just clarify the nature of the information that will be contained in the files?
Okay. With a Form 4 is the information of the applicant and the information of the mental health care user, the addresses of the families. And with Form 5s, it should be a medical history of the patient and the condition of the patient. And Form 7, it's a recommendation of a healthcare establishment of the institution. Form 11, it's a recommendation of a discharge, or it's a recommendation of transfer from where the patient is coming from and indicated where the patient is going to.
Thank you. Can you please turn to page 2 of the report? At the first paragraph after the address of the institution, it is recorded that the institution had a bed capacity of 150, which was increased to 300 to provide space for admissions from Life Esidimeni in July 2016. Do you see that?
Council, you said which page? You said page 2. I can't see that.
Page 2 of the report is the Cullinan Care and Rehabilitation Center report around transferring of patients from Life Esidimeni. Do we have the same document?
Yes, I've seen the sentence.
Yes, like what I need to, what I request you to clarify is, do I understand this paragraph or the sentence to be saying that provision was made for the incoming mental health care users emanating from Life Esidimeni?
No, Council. Cullinan, our bed capacity is 150. To increase for the increment of this capacity, it was after taking over the patients from Enka and Siabadinga. That's where the capacity was increased.
Is it not that this report is in relation to the transfer of patients from Life Esidimeni to Cullinan Care and Rehabilitation Center?
It is, Council.
And then where does it mention that the increment of this capacity was meant for patients emanating from Siabadinga?
Maybe that's where, Council, we made a mistake of indicating about the 300 that we're talking about here. But the capacity was indeed increased after taking over the patients from Siabadinga and Enka.
So this information is incorrect about the increment?
No, is it? Is that a fair proposition to put the witness? The witness has just explained to you what the sentence means. Capacity was increased from 150 to 300 after some occurrence. And it says to provide space for admissions from Life Esidimeni in July 2016. Why is that inaccurate?
Justice, the witness has testified that the increment was to accommodate patients from Siabadinga, not from Life Esidimeni, as recorded in the report.
I just added the detail. They were round-routed. She's just adding the detail.
If I may proceed, Justice.
Yes, certainly. What I'm saying is that you can't put it to her that it is inaccurate. You could possibly say that you should have said they went a round trip from Life Esidimeni through Siabadinga and Enka. But the core of the question is accurate. Anyway, please proceed.
Thank you. Ms. Dlovi, if you may look for a file 9, there's a box just before you. If you can try and see if you can locate file 9. And if you may please turn to page 2988. You will note that the document that is before you is an affidavit by Anatokozile Mtembu. And if you turn to page 2989, at paragraph 5,
(2989).
Yes. Paragraph 5.
Yes, Counsel.
It is recorded that Busisiwe, the affidavit reads that Busisiwe was my younger sister. From the time that she was born, she could not talk and suffered from mental illness. And I just want specifically to refer you to the 2 paragraphs from which I want to pose my question to you. Please turn to page 2990, paragraph 7.
Yes, Counsel.
It records that on 25 July 2016, my cousin Sipho Shabalala received a phone call from a social worker at Cullinan, Daphne. She told him that Busisiwe has died. Sipho gave Daphne my phone number, and Daphne then phoned me to say that Busisiwe had died at Cullinan and I must go to collect her corpse from there. And then if you can also go to paragraph 10, at the same page, where the affidavit records that Daphne said that I had to take Busisiwe's body on that day because there was no space in the mortuary. I phoned my daughter who arranged and paid for an undertaker. I did not see inside the mortuary. I was too stressed, but I could see that it was a very small space and it was not refrigerated. I told Daphne that I would not be able to identify Busisiwe because I was stressed. She said that it was not her problem if I took the wrong body. Do you see that?
Yes, I see.
These paragraphs were read to you yesterday. And in your response, you testified that you, as a social worker, you will not have made mention of the statement recorded in this affidavit. Do you recall that?
Yes, Council.
Do you consider this as a serious charge or accusation against you? And if so, what could be the reason that this allegation can be made in this affidavit?
What I can say about this statement, Council, is that as a social worker, we're working with the emotions of the families. And some of the people, they, after hearing the bad news, they react differently. So maybe Mrs. Mutembu thought that I said this word just because she was devastated about the death of her sister. But as a social worker, on a daily basis, when doing counseling of this sort, we come across this kind of situation. We don't take them seriously so that it can ruin the relationship between us and the families. We accept and continue with the counseling or continue with supporting the family.
So the information contained in this paragraph in relation to what you have conveyed to them is incorrect?
It is incorrect, Council, because yesterday I did mention that as a social worker, I am here to serve the community. I'm working with the social and emotional well-being of the families. The families need support from the social worker. The families need comfort from the social worker. The families need assistance from the social worker. As a social worker, I cannot say this kind of word to a family who is so devastated hearing about the breaking news of the death of her sister.
And you have been so duly committed to assist these affected family members?
Yes, Council.
You also testified that in some instances, there was no cooperation from families. Do you remember that evidence?
Yes, Council.
Can you please just give an account of the difficulties that you have experienced in relation to the family members of the patients at the facility?
The cooperation that we are not getting from the families is that when we call the family to visit or to come and fetch the patients for LOA, they will keep on saying, I will come, I'm busy, I'm going to work. That's why we don't find cooperation from them. And it is a serious challenge for us. Because as a healthcare worker professional, I think it's also good for the families to come and spend time with their loved ones in the institution, to come and have fun during the Christmas parties, during the Valentine's Day, because we do have some parties that are happening in the institution, so that they can come and bond with their beloved ones in the institution. That is our challenge when we don't get cooperation from them.
So essentially, the impression that you got was that some of the family members appeared to be committed elsewhere without giving priority to attend at the facility.
Yes, Council.
Thank you, Ms. Ndlovu. There are no further questions.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Advocate Tamo. Wait. Council, I think it's your turn.
Thank you, Justice Msaneka. I thought my colleague will start first.
Do you want her to go ahead of you?
It's fine. There's nothing much that I have. Just 2 questions to clarify. I can go ahead.
Yes, please do.
Ms. Ndlovu, you had testified yesterday that some of these families dump their relatives with you and so on. Would you agree with me that from the profile of the patients which you had received, they come from different places, and most of them came from the south of Johannesburg. Is that so?
Yes, Council.
And the south of Johannesburg to Cullinan, it's quite a distance. Is that so?
Yes, Council.
And you will also accept that there will be different reasons why people will not frequently visit their relatives at a center.
I agree with you, Council.
You agree with that? And you will agree with me as well that it will be quite incorrect to generalize, or that is about the reasons on why, or use one reason for each one of them as to why they are not visiting their relatives. Would you agree with me?
I agree with you, Council. I'm not generalizing. It's just that I cannot give each and every incidence of the cooperation that we are not getting from the families.
And it may be, would you also agree with me that it may be that some of them did not have transport fares to travel to Pretoria?
I agree with you, Council, because in some instances, families will highlight that to us that we are pensioners, we don't have money to come to the facility.
Yes.
Yes.
And you had testified that earlier on in that is testimony, and throughout you had been taken through this, that you took or chose a small number of them so that they may adjust at your institution from Life Esidimeni. That is the number that you specified was 10. Do you still remember?
Yes, Council.
And that you took more than 10 at one go went against the purpose of you choosing the number of 10. That is, in order to allow them to adjust. Is that so?
Yes, Council.
And you had also testified that because it was hectic, you were asked about, that is by legal aid in cross-exam, because it was hectic, you were unable to attend to most of these patients properly. So, do you still remember that?
Yes, Council.
And one of the impacts of you being hectic is that you are not able to do your periodical reviews, the Section 30 periodical reviews. Do you still recall that?
Yes, Council.
And would you agree with me that the purpose of you doing the periodical review is to assess the level of their health at a certain point in time and their fitness at a certain point in time? Do you agree with me?
I agree with you, Council.
And that will assist you in determining the proper treatment and care that they will require at a certain point in time whilst they are under your care. Do you agree with that?
I agree with you, Council.
And these would be some of the patients which were moved to Enka, Siabadinga, at a later stage when you receive more patients from Life Esidimeni. Would you agree with me?
I don't agree with you, Council, because with the periodical reviews, we do them after 6 months.
After 6 months.
So the patients that were transferred to, or that were discharged to Siabadinga, and or especially those who were transferred to Enka, we didn't stay with them for a period of 6 months.
Oh, I see. I see. So all the patients which you transferred had their periodical reviews done?
Those the periodical reviews were done in Life Esidimeni. So it means after 6 months, with their stay with us, we must do the review.
Okay.
Then thereafter, it's going to be a yearly basis.
Okay. Thank you. And
well, just before you move off from that review, your report tells us that the patients from Life Esidimeni and those ultimately who came to you from Sabadinga and Enka did not fit your admission profile. Is that correct?
Judge, can I please get the question again?
I say your report tells us that the patients from Life Esidimeni did not fit your admission profile.
It is true, Council. Hence, I've indicated yesterday that we admitted psychosis patient and the schizophrenia patients of which they are not suitable for our institution, as the institution is admitting severe and profound intellectual disability.
So how would you have done periodic reviews, assuming the patients had been with you for 6 months? Were you in a position to do that in any event?
The periodicals were not done, even today.
I understand that. If they were there for 6 months, would you have been able to do the periodicals?
With the patients that fits the criteria, it was going to be simple for us to continue with the periodicals. But for those who doesn't fit, it was going to be difficult because
you already told us those that you admitted didn't fit the criteria. So I'm saying, how would you have assessed them? Because they were outside your normal expertise.
Yes, Council.
Is that true?
It is true, Council.
Yes. And you didn't finish 6 months with these patients because? Why didn't you finish 6 months with them?
The patients were to be discharged to the NGOs because we were getting patients again. Some we went and fetched them. Then the ones from the 23rd of June, they were brought in the institution. And the ones who were brought in the institution, it was not our last batch. The last batch that we received in January, 25 January 2017.
Now, the patients you had received from Life Esidimeni, why didn't they finish 6 months at your institution?
The pressure was to create space. That is why they were admitted and discharged. They were admitted in Kalinen and discharged to the NGO in order to create space.
But most of them, the next time you saw them, they were dead. That's why they didn't finish 6 months there. Is that correct? They were corpses.
Judge, I agree with you.
And what remained for you was to go and report to their families that they had died.
Yes, Judge.
So there was no 6 months in which to do periodicals, in fact. Because within that time, they died.
Yes, Judge.
Any further questions?
Thank you. And lastly, on this point, Ms. Ndlovu, would you agree that the circumstances under which they were placed, they were not given a chance to survive?
And to adjust and to cope.
Adjust.
I agree with you, Counsel.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Justice Masanek.
Thank you. Counsel.
Thank you, Justice.
The advocate asked to ask you a few more questions. So she's really having a second bite of the cherry. But she promised me she won't be long. I just wanted you to understand that. Advocate Hassan.
Good morning, Mrs. Ndlovu.
Morning, Counsel.
Mrs. Ndlovu, you testified that there were many more life Esidimeni patients that were transferred to Cullinan than you expected.
Yes, Counsel.
And that it was more than the facility and the staff could cope with. Is that correct?
Yes, Counsel.
And you've said that it was hectic, the process.
Yes, Counsel.
And the transfers to Cullinan took place around May and June 2016. Is that correct?
Yes, Counsel.
And you've also just said to us that and many were moved out of Cullinan to NGOs in order to create space. There was a pressure of space.
Yes, Counsel.
So many of the patients didn't stay that long. The life Esidimeni patients didn't actually stay that long at Cullinan before being moved to the NGOs, correct?
If I can...
By that long, I mean a month, 6 weeks before they were transferred to the NGOs.
Yes, Counsel. But, Counsel, can I add something on that? Remember, I said we discharged 73 or 74 patients, our initial patients from Cullinan Care and Rehabilitation Center. So most of the patients in the institution is life Esidimeni patients. Then those whom we discharged to Enka and Siabadinga, they can be plus minus less than 45.
Less than 45 what?
Less than 45 patients were discharged from CCRC to the NGOs.
And are those life Esidimeni patients?
Yes, Counsel.
Thank you. And you say that when many of the life Esidimeni patients were first brought to Cullinan, they had incomplete records.
Yes, Counsel, especially the ones who were brought, because with the ones who we went to fetch, we were checking the files and the medication. We were given 7-day supply medication. But with the ones who were brought in the institution, they were brought with no records.
Are you saying that those patients that you went to collect had complete records?
Not complete, but at least there was something, a scanty information.
But they were incomplete records.
Yes,
is that correct?
Counsel.
Okay. Did you know any of the life Esidimeni patients and their families before they were transferred to Cullinan?
Before?
Before they were transferred in May last year?
No, Counsel.
Yet you refer in your testimony to families dumping patients. Were you referring to the families of patients who were transferred as part of the Marathon project? Were you referring to those families?
Counsel, I was giving an example, referring to the patients that we had in Cullinan.
Were you referring to the patients who were transferred from life Esidimeni and their families?
I was referring to those whom we were having before we can admit the patients from Life Esidimeni. With the Life Esidimeni patients, I cannot judge the families by saying they've dumped, because we're still trying to trace the families.
So when you talk about the dumping of patients, are you talking about the dumping of patients by families of the former Life Esidimeni patients?
No, Council.
Thank you. In fact, wouldn't you agree that if any dumping took place, it was at the behest of the provincial government in the way they moved patients in and out of Cullinan?
I beg your pardon, Council?
Would you not agree that any dumping, if we were to use the word dumping at all, it would more accurately describe not family members dumping their patients, but the government dumping patients in different facilities through the Marathon Project?
Hi, that one, Council.
Do you not agree?
I agree with you, Council.
Thank you very much. That's all from me, Justice Council.
Thank you, Council. We've come to the end of the questions we put to you. Again, thank you for being here and making yourself available. We're trying to get to the truth and the bottom of this difficult tragedy. Is there anything you want to say at the end of your testimony before we release you?
Firstly, I would like to humbly put my apologies for the families who thought that maybe I've kicked their conscience during this process of Life Esidimeni. And for those who lost their loved ones, I'm still here, families, to give you support. I remember I still have a wheelchair of the family of Gumede. I promise, ma'am, by next week, I'll bring the wheelchair in Meadowlands. And for the whole of South Africa, the people who are watching this interview, as a social worker, I am appealing because we still have patients that we don't know their families. So for the families who are still
patients,
looking,
you mean?
The mental health care users.
Yes, who are still alive.
Yes, and we do have others who are dead. I cannot mention their name over the media, but I'm appealing for the families who are still trying to locate the placement of their loved ones to contact me in Cullinan Care and Rehabilitation Center. They can physically come to the institution or contact me on 012-734-7048 or 082-8699-448. Families, I am there to assist you, to help you, and give you support. Thank you so much.
How are you going to deal with the 6 corpses you told us about yesterday? What are the plans of CRC around those deceased bodies?
They are 6 with the other one. The family is there in Johannesburg. We've assisted, help with my communication with the social worker from Johannesburg Metro, Johannesburg Municipality, so that they can assist the family in burying the deceased. But for those whom we're still trying to trace the families, It's going to be a work in process up until we have maybe advices from above.
And those corpses would have been now what? Nearly more than a year in the mortuary, isn't it?
We have one corpse that is now 1 year, 4 months in the mortuary. Then the rest, they are still less than a year. It's still some months.
And they're all part of the Esidimeni patients, isn't it?
Part of the Esidimeni,
I'll tell you, I don't want to open up your evidence unduly. In other words, I'm testing whether the family committee
Judge,
related to the patients who were at Esidimeni could help in identifying or finding the families of the corpses that have been in the mortuary for over a year.
With the live Esidimeni patients, I think it's 2 or 3 patients that are in mortuary.
But you have invited everybody to be in touch with you so that we can try and identify those corpses so they can be laid to rest properly.
Yes, Judge. I will gladly appreciate your cooperation regarding this.
Very well. Is there anything else you want to say? No?
Nothing, Judge.
Okay. Once more, thank you for coming, and you are excused from these proceedings.
Thank you so much.
Counsel, shall we call the next witness?
Thank you, Justice Msaneke. The next witness will be Ethel Ngube, the Precious Angel representative. My colleague, Nontlantla Ina, would lead her.
Thank you. We're about to continue with the proceedings. Shall we go quiet, please? Would you put your full names on record?
My name is Ethel Ginino Mpumelelo Ncube.
Ms. Ncube, welcome.
Thank you, Judge.
And I'd like to thank you for making time to come and talk to us. You're going to be asked questions by evidence leader, Advocate Nkuchana, after which the other advocates will put questions to you in order to understand your evidence.
Okay.
Yes. Please be relaxed, and if you have any concerns, I'm here.
Thank you.
To look after you and protect you, provided you answer all the questions. Counsel, please proceed. Before I do so, I've got to swear you in. And you have an option to have an affirmation or to do the conventional oath, which ends up with "So help me God." Which one do you choose?
We can do any oath, Justice.
You'll do anyone? Okay. Please swear that the evidence you are about to give will be the truth, nothing but the truth. And if so, please do raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Counsel.
Thank you, Justice. Good morning, Ms. Ncube.
Morning, Counsel.
I'll be asking you.
I beg your pardon. You are being cross-examined, led by Advocate Yina, and not Advocate Nkuchana. It's Advocate Yina. Thank you. Please proceed, Counsel.
Thank you, Justice. If I may ask, how old are you, ma'am?
34 years.
And what were you doing for a living during the period between 2015 to 2016?
Okay, I am a parent of a 12-year-old whom lives with intellectual severe and profound disability on the CP side, and I have been running a stimulation center for children with severe profound disabilities, and have been supportive from the Department of Mental Health, and I have been an anchor for a certain institute which deals with health relation issues of
Let's break away now from Esidimeni for a short while as it continues in Parktown here in Johannesburg. Let's now bring you up to speed with breaking news this hour. The presidency has announced a cabinet reshuffle. Now here are the changes to cabinet that President Jacob Zuma reshuffled. First, we have Professor Slengiwe Mkhize, who is now the Minister of Higher Education and Training. Second, Ms. Ayanda Dlodu, who is the Minister of Home Affairs. Third, Mamaloko Kubai, who's the Minister of Communications. Fourth, David Mashlobo, who is now the new Minister of Energy. Fifth, Advocate Bongani Thomas Bongo, who is the Minister of State Security. Sixth, Buti Manamela is now the Deputy Minister of Higher Education and Training. Meanwhile, the Parliament's inquiry into allegations of state capture at Eskom has started. Now, up to 40 witnesses are expected to testify before the Public Enterprises Committee. Their names have not been made public. Let's now go live to the inquiry.
Contracts and also making it more difficult for other companies to supply coals. We could then shift to Trillion. This has been much in the news in recent weeks, and again, I'll be brief through this. In December 2016, Minister Lynn Brown categorically denied here in this Parliament that Eskom had conducted any business with Trillion Capital Partners. Since come to light that Eskom has in fact paid Trillion almost 600 million rand for so-called consulting work, unofficially contracted to McKinsey and allegedly undertaken by other Gupta companies since early 2016. McKinsey has also scored big in these deals, netting over 1 billion rand from Eskom over the same period. During 2015, McKinsey negotiated 2 contracts with Eskom. The mandates for both were approved by the board tender committee. McKinsey then partnered with Gupta-linked Trillion, allegedly in order to meet Eskom's empowerment requirements. However, it's since emerged that Trillion may not have in fact met these criteria and anyway subcontracted up to 77% of the work to a 0% black-owned firm in Dubai, E-Gateway Consultants. At this stage, there's no evidence that any contracts exist between Eskom and Trillion or McKinsey and Trillion. This means that all payments made to Trillion are likely in contravention of the PFMA, Section 45C, as well as internal Eskom policies. I won't go further into this except to note that it's now come to light the individuals in Eskom who facilitated these deals, including Mr. Koko, Mr. Singh, Mr. Mabulani, Mr. Kalima, Prish Govender, and others. We should note, though, that there are a number of really damning reports and investigations. Those by Oliver Wyman, Jeff Budlander, the G9 Forensic, Bowman's, and we hope the committee subpoenas all these reports because they confirm illicit relations between Trillion and Eskom and have provided firm recommendations for criminal and civil proceedings against those implicated. However, Eskom and Minister Brown have been slow to act, and when Eskom finally acted against McKinsey, Trillion, and implicated officials earlier this month, astonishingly, Minister Brown and the board hastily replaced the acting CEO, Gludler, with a less than reputable Sean Maritz, and they suspended the head of legal, Suzanne Daniels. Again, Chair, in the interest of time, I'm going to bring this to a close, and I'd briefly refer you to some of the issues which have still not come to light. So the issues I've spoken about, much is reported, there's much evidence out there. There are a number of additional issues which this committee might wish to probe, and I'll just very briefly summarize these. It's been reported in the press that Machela Koko awarded a 1 billion rand contract to Impulse International, while his 26-year-old stepdaughter, Koketso Chomo, was the director of the board and an equity holder. Mr. Koko was subsequently suspended for this, and I believe his disciplinary hearing is being held to today. What's been less in the light is Mr. Koko's collaboration with the Coal Transporters Forum, and you've seen ways in which his collusion with that forum led to an extraordinary strike by coal truckers, which shut down central Pretoria, hundreds of coal trucks on the 1st of March, with potentially extremely serious consequences for our economy. Mr. Koko has also engineered the suspension of Kiran Maharaj, a senior Eskom executive, just as she was negotiating with the Coal Transporters Forum for more favorable terms. We've already mentioned the other issue of diesel and inflated contracts during the load-shedding years. We think there's also much to be probed around Eskom's maintenance contracts. Eskom has spent a huge amount on maintenance and coal-fired stations over the last years. To its credit, it's through that resulted in their performance improving, but it's not clear that all of those contracts have necessarily been clean. The same issue around Eskom's big capital budgets, the Medupi and Kusile and Ngula contracts, and it's clear that the full scale of contractor and subcontractor work needs to be probed. We know already that the quality management contracts, very sizable contracts related to Kusile and Medupi, involved corruption, and some hearings are being held within Eskom and staff fired. I will have no time to cover the nuclear deal, but clearly this is also relevant within this context. I'll just mention two final areas. Eskom has a Treasury Department. It had a Treasury Department that was extremely good in raising capital for Eskom, low-cost capital. We've seen the way in which regiments and then Trillion, some of these services have been outsourced to these companies, and we've seen a pattern of Eskom increasingly relying on more expensive finance, particularly development finance institutions and Chinese finance. This has had huge implications on Eskom's costs of capital. And finally, Chair, if I could mention the issue of Eskom audits. Eskom used to have 3 auditors, 2 were let go, 1 remained, and only in this last year has identified irregularities and a qualified audit. Now, I guess the question does arise of whether this might and should have arisen earlier. Again, let's just understand that the consequences of all of these are massive to Eskom's financial viability and its ability to continue to provide reliable and effective and cost-effective services to power our economy. Chair, I will end with recommendations and then just a final comment. The most important thing that this committee will do is ultimately in your findings and recommendations. And clearly your immediate task is to probe breaches of laws and regulations and to expose individual acts of corruption. Where these are clear, it will need to recommend prosecution and forward the relevant details to the national prosecuting authorities who will have to be held to account. This inquiry is a unique opportunity to force implicated individuals to answer under oath and publicly here to widely publicize incidents of administrative and financial malfeasance and blatant corruption. But arguably an equally important task is and fundamental task of the committee will be to expose the way in which the board and executive appointments and directives have been subsumed by a political project that serves a narrow and corrupt elite, and to make recommendations of how Eskom's governance could be reformed and strengthened in the future. We know a great deal of work has actually already been initiated by Cabinet under the guidance of the Deputy President around governance of state-owned enterprises, and we hope we can draw on this. So finally, Chair, to conclude, may I say this. There have been threats against individuals who will be making submissions to this committee and also whistleblowers. South Africa, in many ways, is at the crossroads. Do we want to live in fear of a small, corrupt elite who are plundering public resources? Or do we want to consolidate and fulfill the development goals of our constitutional democracy so that more and more of our people can benefit? South Africans fought a long and bitter war against colonialism and then apartheid. We cannot lie down now in the face of another minority who are destroying our public institutions, our state-owned companies, our economy, and the prospects and ability for us to alleviate poverty. If we are to transform our economy and society, we will need greater transparency, and we will need the areas that we've covered already to be exposed and governance improvements recommended. My academic colleagues and I, collectively involved in the State Capacity Research Project, will continue to examine how we came to be where we are today and how we might build a better future. Many other organizations, projects, journalists, individuals in South Africa are committed to doing the same and will support the work of your committee. This is arguably the most important inquiry that in Parliament's history. It certainly involves billions more than have been investigated before. And at stake is the integrity of our state and our institutions. South Africans are watching the work of this committee. We wish you courage, integrity, purposefulness in your conduct of the inquiry, and ultimately that you would make recommendations around holding individuals to account, as well as how we might strengthen governance of key institutions such as Eskom going forward. I thank you for your attention, sir.
Thank you very much, Professor.
I am not sure if there is anyone from your colleagues that wants to add on what you have just presented. If there is no one, then I will now give over to the members of parliament to respond. I will give each member to ask question directly, and the professor will respond. I'll give each member 10 minutes to do that, and the response from the professor, it will go on like that. Thank you very much. Honorable Mazon.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thank you, Professor, and thank you to your team for this incredibly comprehensive document. I think that what you have added to our committee is invaluable, and not only on behalf of this committee, but on behalf of South Africa, I thank you for this kind of information. Professor, you were part of the war room that was instated during the time of the load shedding. Now, for some reason, and I'd like to just state, I've been on this committee since 2011, so I've been through Minister Gigaba going into Minister Brown. At the time of the setting up of the war room, it became very clear that we as a committee were not going to be informed as to what was taking place in that war room. And many documents were sent to that war room via various members of parliament when concerns became apparent, because in our dealings going through annual statements, also with whistleblowers coming to us as members of parliament, things became patently obvious that there was a large deal of corruption taking place, and there was a reason that things were being kept specifically from the Public Enterprises Portfolio Committee, because one thing I can say is it's always been a robust committee that has had no problem in engaging in very difficult conversations to have in Parliament. At the stage, various charges were laid against certain individuals, and they were reported to the war room. And I think probably what shocked me the most was the way the war room was making recommendations, but those recommendations weren't coming to us as Parliament, and certainly weren't coming to us as the Public Enterprises Portfolio Committee, which has oversight over the entity of Eskom. Professor, can you tell us, in that war room, were you aware of these issues that were being sent to you from the Public Enterprises Committee? Were these issues actually brought to you as a war room? Why was the war room wrapped up? Because clearly you were wrapped up before your work was finished. I personally think that your war room should still be in existence. This is a continuous problem, and I'd like to know from your perspective, and I don't want to put you in a position where you talk out against perhaps any confidentiality agreements that you've signed, but you know, I'd just like to understand why the war room was wrapped up and sort of, it looked like it just tapered off, and you weren't allowed to finish your duties. Professor, I think you've given us in a nutshell the big problems that exist here, but I'd like your opinion as someone who's investigated this together with Ms. Godino and your colleagues extensively. Do we not think that one of the issues that we should be interrogating very, very carefully is why, and as you know, this is a phased inquiry. We start off with Eskom, we go with Transnet, and then we go into Denel. Why certain names appear continuously across the entire spectrum of public enterprises. Now, in your document, the name of Salim Issa appears continuously. A frightening thing is that the name Salim Issa will appear continuously when we investigate Transnet and will appear continuously when we investigate Denel. You said in your presentation to us that people rotated and the Eskom board rotated continuously. I think it's very, very worrying that there was a rotating door between the public enterprises, that CEOs, when the heat got a bit too high, were simply swapped from one entity to the next. And I think at that point, government should have stepped in and said, clearly, you know, if something's gone wrong at Transnet, you can't make it right by putting them in Eskom or by putting them in Denel. And this constant rotation of the same people through the public enterprises has just perpetuated what we now view and what I believe was made the Oxford Term of the Year, state capture. And one has to ask, when the executive looked at this, certainly a reasonable person or reasonable people would have said there has to be something very strange and very concerning going on here, because if you could see it, and we could see it, and every South African could see it, certainly the executive looked at this and said, right, you know, there is a massive problem here. Now, we know that the executive was untrustworthy in terms of their ability to present us with information, because you yourself know that in a parliamentary question asked to Minister Lynn Brown about the relationship with Eskom and Trillion, she lied blatantly. We can't even say it was a massaging of the truth, as sometimes we say in Parliament, because we say that to call someone a liar is unparliamentary. It was a blatant lie. And I know it because I was the one that was lied to. It was an answer to my question. Now, had that question not been asked, and had the Pandora's box not been open at that point, we have to assume that Eskom would never have come clean and told us that this work was happening. So my question, and perhaps it's slightly unfair because it does put you in a position where, you know, I'm asking you to read the crystal ball. But how many more Pandora's boxes are we going to open as we go along? And I suppose that that's why this investigation is so essential. It's our job to unlock all these Pandora's boxes. But as you sit here today and you give us advice and you have asked us to be courageous and determined, is there anything else besides what is blatantly obvious that you and your team can suggest to us that we need to open, that we haven't looked at thoroughly enough? Because we have done a lot of investigation. And do you suggest that going beyond this, and when we go into the other public enterprises, you foresee another issue that we need to interrogate, something like the way the Trillion issue became such public knowledge? And then, Professor, my last question to you and your team. I'm amazed that money can change hands in such a way that we've become immune to the term millions because we're so used to dealing with the term billions. But one has to ask, where has the money gone? Because it's certainly very difficult to trace in terms of companies that they link to, because we know that there are so many what we call postbox enterprises that were developed. Now, the question is, if banks systematically started closing Gupta company-linked firms' accounts down, that money had to go somewhere. Now, 5 billion, 6 billion rand is a little bit too much money to hide under a mattress. In your opinion, where do you think that money has gone, and how do you think that money was allowed to leave the shores of South Africa? Thank you, Chair.
Professor, can you respond to those?
So, Honourable Mazone, thank you for those questions. The first one around the war room. Remember, the war room was set up in the midst of load shedding and a crisis around that, and was set up essentially to assist Eskom to move as quickly as possible to restore supply security, as well as bring in other resources, and that was our focus. I have no memory of any submissions from Parliament landing up in the war room. But I would highlight what I said in my earlier presentation, that it is deeply regrettable that investigations and reports that were being undertaken at the time, in particular the Denton's report, and you would have seen how extensive the Denton's report is. It's not just on individual acts of corruption, it's a systematic review of what had gone wrong in Eskom. That report was not tabled to the war room. Now, I think a question needs to be asked of the Minister and the department why that was not the case. I think it's a legitimate question of whether that report was ever tabled in Cabinet. It was an extremely important report. And remember, there were 3 versions of it. A very heavily redacted version which surfaced, a semi-redacted version which is circulated, but the original report with names and companies of individuals in it has never surfaced. It exists, and I guess this committee would have the powers of subpoenaing that report. You asked, and you've mentioned, why is it that we see the same individuals appearing and we see a kind of recycling of individuals? And I think this feeds into...
Well, we're going to break away from Parliament and we're coming back to this top story. The presidency has announced a cabinet reshuffle, and there's a number of names that has changed during the cabinet reshuffle, which President Zuma just changed. Now, looking at the issues and the names that was put forward, first we have Professor Slengiwe Mkhize, who's now the Minister of Higher Education and Training. 2, Ayanda Dlodlu is now the Minister of Home Affairs, away from Communications. Mamoloko Kubai is the new Minister of Communications. David Mashlobo is the Minister of Energy. New appointment, Advocate Bongani Thomas Bongo, who's the Minister of State Security. Buti Manamela is the Deputy Minister of Higher Education and Training. Joining us now on the line, of course, we have Professor Susan Boysen to give us her particular take on the political developments in our country. Let's go to her live. A very good morning to you, Professor, and welcome.
Good morning, Elvis.
Professor, what do you make of the sudden and shock reshuffle, some call it?
Yes, indeed. It was at least not one of these just after midnight reshuffles, but it's certainly a very important one with a few very important moves. And here I think particularly of Bladen Zemande, who was shuffled right out, not just out of his portfolio of higher education, but also out of cabinet altogether. We see David Mashlobo moving into that very sensitive portfolio of energy, with all the nuclear issues pending, other energy mix policies under deliberation, and he moves away from state security, a new appointment in state security, and therefore, a few very crucial appointments, and a few others who seem a bit inconsequential but musical chairs. And I think in the overall, we see here a president who is exercising some of the last unambiguous powers that he still enjoys. The President Zuma, who is unambiguously, either in the last few months of being both ANC president and state president of South Africa, or possibly losing and letting his proxies lose at the December ANC conference, after which he would be in a much weaker position in government and in relation to cabinet. So I think he's using these last-minute opportunities to make changes to a cabinet and get a cabinet that will probably be helpful to him in the post-December conference period.
Now, Dr. Bladen Zemande was axed. What does this mean for the relationship between the 3 parties, the tripartite alliance, the African National Congress, the SACP?
It is one of the last final eulogies, really, to the tripartite alliance. The tripartite alliance has really totally disintegrated in this period, 10 years in power of Jacob Zuma. The tripartite alliance partners were ecstatic at Polokwane 10 years ago when President Zuma was elected ANC president. And so that relationship has totally disintegrated. And that is quite a big indictment. Some of the other SACP members remain in cabinet, and Rob Davies, Ibrahim Patel are names that come to mind. But Blades Nzimande, as the leader of the SACP, has been the big thorn in the flesh of President Zuma, and being so active in the SACP top leadership structures, he has been extremely outspoken about the disappointment the SACP has felt in relation to President Zuma. And this is the president's final sardonic, in effect, act against Blades Nzimande and, in fact, against the SACP, because we're also expecting announcements on student fees pretty shortly. The president cannot keep it in his silent inbox much longer, and especially if there are positive announcements for the students, we know that the president wouldn't like to see such announcements associated with Blades Nzimande, who had by now become one of his arch rivals.
Now, the communications minister was moved on the eve of the announcement of the SABC board. Why do you think that was the case?
You know, we do not all the intricate inside details, of course. It might have been that she became an important discordant voice there. We do not know, that the president did not entirely agree with. It could be that the president just has better control over and wants to please more a new incumbent into that position. Some of these details of the exact motivations will only come to light as we really start digging into those. But it is a very important and very interesting change that we've seen there. Ayanda has always given the impression that she is a good, sensitive, responsive to the president type of cabinet member. Maybe she is simply more needed in another portfolio now that the SABC battle seems to have been settled of sorts, at least with the announcement, even if there are important critiques of the announcements, the contents of the announcement, but it might be that the president feels she has finished that battle, move her to another portfolio, for example.
The new Minister of State Security is Advocate Bongani Thomas Bongo. Do we know anything about him at this stage, Professor?
Elvis, I do not, honestly. I haven't got direct knowledge of his recent deployments and positions. I don't know what might have qualified him in the eyes of the president for this very important portfolio. We know that David Mahlobo, outgoing, he has rendered an unambiguously loyal, very controversial service to the president, and it might be that the president reckons that section of state apparatuses has been so well sorted out by David Mahlobo, so subdued, so subverted, and made so subject to the whims of the president that David Mahlobo's services are not needed there anymore, perhaps thinking that let's put apparently by all appearances professional, serious person in that portfolio. What I think is of greater concern is like a person like David Mahlobo with his serious political inclinations and pro-Zuma inclinations, more than inclination, proven actions, like overseeing the borrowing of signal around Parliament, etc., that he is moved to this incredibly sensitive portfolio of energy, where we have seen nuclear decisions being challenged. We have heard Malusi Gigaba saying just a few days ago that suggesting that yes, indeed, nuclear cannot be afforded at this stage. So maybe the president wants to move a stronger person into that portfolio of energy, so that that type of sentiment can be of not affordable nuclear energy can be countered.
Now, this follows on the back of Parliament's inquiry into allegations of state capture, which is currently underway. Does that perhaps also have something to do with this? Because we also understand that Gerinel is going to prosecute Duduzane Zuma.
Yes, indeed, that's another new development. Yes, you know, state capture cannot be, we cannot keep it far from our minds in these very politically sensitive and capture-prone eras. Also in a period where President Jacob Zuma is, in some respect or another, is on his way out, and getting sensitive, pro-Zuma people in a few other sensitive portfolios might give him a last few chances to complete tasks of capture in which he had been obstructed to date, because his time to do that might be running out.
Now, some would suggest that it looks like it's the final kick of a dying horse, Professor, but some would also say that the president is a brilliant chess player. Has that anything got to do with the elective conference coming in December?
It could very well have. You know, many of these portfolios will reflect decisions that are taken. People out there will reflect on the power of the president. And I think the fact that the president is at this late stage so prepared to demonstrate that he has got serious remaining powers, that he is not, even if in some respects definitely unambiguously lame duck, that he wants to demonstrate the power that he retains, and therefore also the power that he retains of the cabinet. Maybe through this he wants to get some more cabinet members to step in line and support him, support him and his quest and his proxies into the elective conference of the ANC, demonstrating that if you do not bring your bids, they could do another cabinet reshuffle and throw out other people before the end of the year. So this is the fact that he's demonstrating his own powers, his state presidential powers, also strengthens his backing of candidates in the run up to that conference, because he shows what can happen to people who do not do what pleases him.
Political analyst Professor Susan Boyson, I thank you so much for coming on board so quickly and giving us your analysis.
My pleasure.
Meanwhile, Media Monitoring Africa has welcomed President Jacob Zuma's appointment of the new SABC board. Speaking to the SABC News a little bit earlier, Media Monitoring Africa's director William Bird says that he hopes that the appointment of the board will help turn around the public broadcaster. Right after that, we will be speaking to Mzwandile Mbeje to talk to us about that. But it seems like that clip is not ready yet, so let's go to Mr. Mbeje. Very good morning to you and welcome, sir.
A very good morning to you.
Come as a surprise, the cabinet reshuffle on our doorstep as we proceeding today. Your thoughts?
It's of course it is a surprise, but maybe it shouldn't, because I think that's how President Zuma normally acts. So when perhaps no one expects him to do something and then he just acts. So like today, of course, he's actually done two important things. He's announced the new SABC board, and of course this issue of cabinet reshuffle. And what is important in that reshuffle is that one minister was axed, Minister of Higher Education, Dr. Bladen Nzimande, but other ones then they were just changed around.
Now, the biggest move, of course, is Minister Bladen Nzimande. Now, that will obviously create a bigger schism within the tripartite alliance. Your thoughts on that? We heard it from the professor, but what do you think about this?
I think if you've been listening carefully and monitoring what has been happening, and particularly the SACP and the alliance, and what particularly Dr. Nzimande has been saying. You remember that the SACP actually took a resolution to call for the president to step aside.
Yes.
And then every public platform, you would hear Minister Nzimande reiterating that call. And there was a point, actually, in fact, I think we have several clips, where he would go as far as saying, so I would say this, he would say this in Zulu, so which means we are not begging for any positions. So I think those that kind of tension in the tripartite alliance, and actually between perhaps the president and Nzimande, so was reaching that boiling point. I'm sure then he felt, well, if the General Secretary of the SACP feels he no longer can work with me, so what is he doing in my cabinet? And I think that's what he did.
Now, that could also lead, of course, the SACP was saying this, that they might go the elections in 2019 alone. Your thoughts on that, and is that a possibility?
We know that the SACP is waiting for the outcome of the December conference. The SACP as a body has not pronounced who it will back. I think they've just taken a decision, but I think everyone can perhaps sense who they're sympathetic to. Unlike, for example, their youth league, or rather their youth wing, YCL, which has pronounced openly that it's backing the deputy president. So, but what the SACP has been doing really has been to speak very loudly against issues of state capture, and then they have said, depending on how the outcome of the December conference, that's when perhaps they'll be able to sit down and decide what is their next move.
The replacement for Dr. Bladen Zimande is Professor Slengiwe Mkhize, who's the Minister of Higher Education and Training. Thoughts on her, and will she perhaps change that around, and could we see fee-free education?
Well, I think that's what everyone is hoping for at some point. It may not be done all at once, but I think the government, even if you look at their utterances, I think the move is towards free education at some point. But even if it were to be introduced, it will be done step by step. So Professor Mkhize, I mean, we are saying professor, so she is very well educated, and then I guess she qualifies to hold the position. So we will really wait and hear, because in the Home Affairs, she hadn't concluded a lot of things. I mean, she was pretty new, and then we know there's that legal challenge that is happening between her and the suspended DG, Mkhuseli Ableni. So those things, well, they're still going to play themselves out, and then so time will tell if she really will then appease that that fees must fall movement. You know, their key demand is that education must be free, and must be free now.
Well, talking about Ableni, he's in court this morning, of course, with the minister, but her replacement is Ayanda Dlodlo, who's now the Minister of Home Affairs, and because of the tensions perhaps within the Home Affairs Department, is that why we're seeing this shift?
Not only in Home Affairs, and perhaps even the communication itself. And I think there's been a lot of toing and froing on a number of issues, and you know, even the appointment of the board took a bit too long. So you could see that there were certain issues that needed to be resolved, and then I'm sure the president then decided that maybe for him to be able to deal with these things appropriately, he needed a new start. That's why he's appointing the new board, and then he's appointing the new minister, so that you don't have an issue of a package, this one beholden to that one and all those things. So to me, it appears that the president decided to say, so with the new board, so I'm starting afresh with the new minister.
So the Minister of Communication is Mamoloko Kubai, moving over from Energy. Now, does this make a difference? Because the board has just been announced, the SABC board, which is a major announcement today. And that was on the eve, of course, of media monitoring taking the president to court almost today.
Yeah. But you remember they had said they were just finalizing the issues of verification. But, you know, some of these things, you and I, it's very difficult to say conclusively what happens, because there are certain processes, so and those who are supposed to apply those processes, so they would obviously come at a determination once they have satisfied themselves. But you can see that I think maybe what the president wants to do, I would assume he probably wants a new start, and I don't know how much that will do towards the December conference, because I can tell you now that every move is viewed from a particular lens. There'll probably be people who would be saying certain things, that he's doing this because he either is strengthening his hand towards December, or he really wants to show that despite what people are saying, he's still in charge.
David Mashlobo is the new Minister of Energy. Let's see if we can have that slide up there, and with the minister there. Of course, move from intelligence. We understand that there was quite some issues with the Minister of Intelligence, knowing some of the things 2 years beforehand than we would know in terms of the Vuwani violence there. But what do we make of the new Minister here of Energy?
Quite honestly, I'll be it was a bit of a surprise, but it was a bit of a surprise, even if there were to be a cabinet change. So I wouldn't expect Minister Mahlobo perhaps to be moved, but that's why I'm saying I'm surprised. But there are some issues which may have necessitated that. You know, for example, the issues around the sacking of former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan, and then there were reports which were said, some people said they were fake, so that may have played into that space, and then those are some of the things that the President perhaps may have considered. So it's quite interesting how he would fare in the energy portfolio.
And there might be some contestations because the Minister of Finance just indicated there will be no more nuclear energy in future, looking at the country and what we require. So there might be some contestations there. Let's look at the screen right now. There's the cabinet reshuffle that we've indicated. Professor Slengiwe Mkhize, Minister of Higher Education and Training. That, of course, that's the new Minister of State, that is State Security. Yes, that's the new State Security Minister, Advocate Bongani Thomas Bongo. We still need to get used to his face because he's the new appointment there. And of course, we've seen the changes now that has happened, and running up to the elective conference, we've also talked about it earlier, Mr. Mbedje. Was this necessitated because of the conference, or was it necessitated in terms of what is currently happening within some of these portfolios where we see some contestations?
You know, right now it's very difficult to separate any action from the current happenings in the country. Particularly if you look at, I mean, there were changes in cabinet, but there's only one person who was axed, that is Minister Nzimande. And given the kind of animosity that you could see had developed between him and the president towards this ANC elective conference, so you can't really say it had nothing to do with it. Though the issue of fees must fall and how it's being handled and all those things would also be taken into account. So I wouldn't say there's just one factor that may have necessitated it, but it's a conglomeration of facts that have perhaps necessitated this.
Buti Manamela is now the new Deputy Minister of Higher Education and Training. He replaced Monana. Of course, we know what happened to him in relation to the abuse of women in a nightclub. But will they, because that was a void to be filled?
Yes.
They needed to fill that.
Absolutely. And I remember, you know, of late you've been having young leaders acquiring either a doctorate, either those leaders from the EFF or the ANC. I know that Buti Manamela has well recently acquired his master's, so which is basically should be an inspiration to young people. So if he feels that kind of portfolio, it really perhaps sends a message that young people really need to look up to some of these young leaders, and I think it's the right choice.
Now, I know I'm relieved. So I'm not too sure about you, but we've got a new board at the SABC.
Operating in a space of uncertainty is very difficult, Elvis. So at least now we know that there's certainty, and then this board has to hit the ground running. And because, I mean, you and I, every month end, we are not sure whether we'll get our money. So at least we'll know exactly who to ask now. We'll be able to go to the board to say, so what are you sorting out in terms of our plans? Already there are issues relating to people you know, there's talk that people may not receive their 13th check. At least there's a new board now, so we'll be able to go to them and say, so will we receive our 13th check? So at least there will be direction, there will be certainty, even if things go the way we don't want them to go, but at least we'll be knowing what's happening. Because so when there's uncertainty and a vacuum, so a lot of things develop, and then you end up having all untruths and people getting confused, so it just becomes a total mess.
But the new board will be boosted, and there will be some sort of certainty because of the interim board that has carried it this far.
Certainly, but I think what will be very key for this board, will they be able to secure us a bailout? Because I think that's what's the problem right now. So I think all of us are hoping that one of the immediate task is to go out there and convince Treasury that we need this money as soon as possible.
Mbeje, I thank you so much for your analysis and coming into studio.
You're welcome.
Zwandile Mbeje, presidential correspondent, and of course here at the SABC. And let's all now smile. We have a board at the SABC. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back. There's lots of news happening today. You also saw Briggs. He's been convicted, 15 years in jail for him. We'll take a look at that. We'll come back to the arbitration process that's currently happening here in Johannesburg, and we'll go back to Parliament to find out what is happening there. State capture, that's the word.
I feel it's a real person.
And it's nutritious and delicious.
It's good. I really like it.
This celebrates being South African. We love our beer, we love our food, we love our music.
For knowing who you are going, you must know where you come from.
I'm excited to be part of this year.
For all your travel trends, catch us every Sunday, 12 midday on Channel 404.
A social worker at the Cullen Care and Rehabilitation Centre, Daphne Ndlovu, continued her testimony at the Life Esidimeni arbitration hearings today. Now, retired Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke questioned her on a report indicating that the patients from Esidimeni did not fit Cullinan's admission profile and whether this report was true.
It is true, Council. Hence, I've indicated yesterday that we admitted psychosis patient and the schizophrenia patients of which they are not suitable for our institution, as the institution is admitting severe and profound intellectual disability.
So how would you have done periodic reviews, assuming the patients had been with you for 6 months? Were you in a position to do that in any event?
The periodicals were not done, even today.
I understand that. If they were there for 6 months, would you have been able to do the periodicals?
With the patients that fits the criteria, it was going to be simple for us to continue with the periodicals. But for those who doesn't fit, it was going to be difficult because...
You already told us those that you admitted didn't fit the criteria. So I'm saying, how would you have assessed them? Because they were outside your normal expertise.
Yes, Council.
Is that true?
It is true, Council.
Yes. And you didn't finish 6 months with these patients because? Why didn't you finish 6 months with them?
The patients were to be discharged to the NGOs because we were getting patients again. Some we went and fetched them. Then the ones from the 23rd of June, they were brought in the institution. And the ones who were brought in the institution, it was not our last batch. The last batch that we received in January, 25 January 2017.
Now, the patients you had received from Life Esidimeni, why didn't they finish 6 months at your institution?
The pressure was to create space. That is why they were admitted and discharged. They were admitted in Kalinin and discharged to the NGO in order to create space.
But most of them, the next time you saw them, they were dead. That's why they didn't finish 6 months there. Is that correct? There were corpses.
Judge, I agree with you.
And what remained for you was to go and report to their families that they had died.
Yes, Judge.
So there was no 6 months in which to do periodicals, in fact. Because within that time, they died.
Yes, Judge.
Well, that continues as we speak. We're going to go back there shortly. Meanwhile, Media Monitoring Africa has welcomed President Jacob Zuma's appointment of the new SABC board. Speaking to us a little bit earlier, Media Monitoring Africa's director, William Baird, says that he hopes that the appointment of the board will help turn around the public broadcaster.
We were preparing, in fact, our papers, and we were going to start them, and we were scheduled to then appear on Tuesday next week. Unfortunately, now we don't have to do that. I think we really need to welcome this important decision, but we must also acknowledge that as delighted as we are, we can't let that delight be clouded over by the fact that it is 3 weeks too late that we've had a public broadcaster having to function without any board at all.
Why do you think the president left it until so very late?
Well, you know, I mean, all of that stuff is speculation. The allegations about them trying to elect their own people into positions of senior management. But I think that the important thing is it would appear that it was only the threat of court action that forced the president to take this decision, which is a pity. You know, it really was a last resort for us. But the fact that we've now got a board, I think we need to all get behind them, support them, and hope that they can start to undo a lot of the damage and restore credibility of the public broadcaster.
What do you make of the new chairperson, Bongamusa Makatini, and the deputy?
Look, I think it's no surprise that the president has chosen those that are probably more closely aligned to him. I think the one concern about the board chair, Mr. Makatini, is that he is apparently the chair of one of Mr. Zuma's family trusts. If that is in fact true, I think it's really important that he resigns from those family trusts immediately, because otherwise his own independence will be seen to be deeply compromised.
It seems that the interim board was retained, to a part of the interim board. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that the interim board demonstrated a clear willingness and desire to get stuff done. They made a lot of movements, a lot of positive changes from what we hear from within the SABC, and certainly on the publicly it looked as though they were doing the right kind of things. So I think it's important that you've retained them, and that there's a little bit of continuity there. There really is a lot that they need to be getting on with. I think one of their key priorities must be, however, to remember that last year we saw very clear threats on the lives of our journalists and direct intimidation, ending tragically in the passing of Suna Fenta, obviously. And one of their priorities must then be to make sure that those responsible for those threats are identified and brought to book.
What are some of the biggest challenges that the new board have to deal with immediately?
Well, I think it's obviously around appointments of some of the senior executives. We know that the interim board has nominated, has gone through public processes to identify some of those people, so it'll be important that the board pursue those avenues and identify the best people to get into those places. I think the editorial policies, that review process that started, it will be a nice way for them to get stuck into those things and make sure that they commit to the independence and credibility of the public broadcaster.
Well, on that note, on our new board, let's now cross back to Parliament into that inquiry into allegations of state capture at Eskom.
About what would electricity really cost the South African public if this kind of corruption didn't take place within within Eskom, which is the main supplier of electricity to the South African population. And linked to that, There has been recently reports of tension between bringing on independent power producers onto the street. Do you think that there's been any impact on what's happening in Eskom vis-a-vis bringing on more independent power producers? And lastly, you know, this inquiry could take us, I don't know how long. We've got to do a thorough job. But in the meanwhile, there could be people sitting within this organization that could influence the inquiry that's taking place. Have you thought about, or your team thought about, any such individuals? You might want to share it with us later on. Any such individuals who you think may need to be removed or suspended whilst this inquiry is continuing, so that they don't influence what happens within the organization as we move forward? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Singh. Professor.
Honorable Singh, you know, when the ANC was unbanned in 1990, clearly it didn't have an energy policy or a program of what it would be doing when it came into government. And it was a period in which there were extraordinarily important discussions around what needed to change. I in my introduction, gave just one statistic of how electrification access was skewed. And so we began at that period to start doing the modeling and the viability analysis of what these programs might look like, so that as a new democratic government was formed, there could be a program in place. And I think we worked extremely constructively in that period, contributed to the energy policy white paper, etc. But to come to your question, do we work with other organizations? We work broadly across the sector. So I've worked, I think, almost with all stakeholders in the sector. I mean, an example, just last week, I co-hosted an event with the South African National Energy Association, etc. So it's very important for us that our research, which is hopefully evidence-based, has a broad impact on the sector as a whole. You mentioned my involvement in the war room. I don't think anything that I was privy to there has fed directly into the work that we're doing now. Most of this investigation is to do with more recent events that we've uncovered. How important is the issue of coal?
Allegations into state capture, that's continuing in Parliament, but the big story today for us here at the SABC, of course, we got a new board, and of course there's lots of reaction to the board as well as the cabinet reshuffle. Now, continuing with that reaction, we're now joined on the line by the UDM leader, Mr. Bantu Lamisa. General, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning, sir.
Now, I know this must have come as a surprise to you, the cabinet reshuffle. Did you see it coming?
Well, there have been some speculations some time ago that Esidimeni might be the next to fall, but I think President Zuma took everybody by the surprise this time around.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think the president decided to reshuffle the cabinet in such a way, the way he did?
Well, of course, the cabinet reshuffle is clear. It has been affected by the removing of one person in the name of Esidimeni. And sadly, it looks like the ANC has no material, has run out of material, because the people who have been changed around have not made any impact in their previous departments. Some of them, in fact, are not even cabinet material. They should have just been sent back, go back home. Should have been sent back home. But people must understand that the ANC government has collapsed long time ago. There is no government here.
Well,
the center cannot hold. Yes, go ahead.
So if the centre cannot hold, General, what does that then mean for the tripartite alliance, seeing that Esidimeni now has been fired?
Well, it serves them correct, because they are the ones who were campaigning to put President Zuma, who was a criminal suspect facing 783 charges. They put him in power, so he is now kicking them one by one. Where is Vavi? Where is Blade? Where is any others?
Mm-hmm. What does this mean for the African National Congress going towards the elective conference at the end of the year? And is there perhaps a benefit for the opposition parties in this one?
Well, the ANC issues must be contained within the ANC. As we know that SACP has openly said they are not going to campaign for Nkosazana Zuma or Lindwe Sulu, but they will campaign or they support Cyril Ramaphosa. They've made their own choice. But that should not be used as a way to punish those who are serving in the nation. But let the alliance deal with their issues anyway.
Mm-hmm. Are you surprised that any of the other appointments that were made, and of course the communications minister has been fired, also not fired, but moved from her position?
All these ministers, look at this one from Home Affairs. She was hardly there for 6 months, and she is known to have only delivered by removing a DG under dark cloud. So there's little we can say about these ministers, all of them. I'm sorry.
Let's move
even
on.
Including Mahlobo.
Yes. Let's now move on to the SABC board. Are you perhaps relieved now that we have a new board in place?
We welcome the board, although there are already some criticism about your chairperson. You guys, you will have to do a good spin and public relations. But that's not for me to handle that. You deal with that matter, but at least there is a board and there are good people in that board.
Mm-hmm. General, I thank you so much for coming online at this point in time and joining us and giving us your views. That was General Bantu Holomisa giving us his thoughts. Well, there's a couple of tweets because it's not our theme today, but you know it happened and it's news, and you are telling us from Mafu that says, so much is happening in South Africa in one day. Cabinet reshuffle and BRICS. Janine says she is a professor, though. Perhaps she will do more than fill the post. Cabinet reshuffle, higher education, #priority post. This one from Yonela says, at this rate, the next move will be reshuffling the provinces. #cabinet reshuffle from Yonela. Yes, there might be a cabinet reshuffle in the provinces, or the provinces to be reshuffled. Maybe we'll have a 10th province as well. Well, let's see where we're going to now. We're going to take a short break, and we will be back after that. Of course, there's two things happening currently. Of course, the arbitration process here in Johannesburg, as well as Parliament. But we'll first take a break, and we'll come right back with that.